Alright guys, hi up. This is Klaz. Welcome to another live cast. And boy, sAviOr versus FirebatHero. I am really looking forward to it. First of all, I want you guys to know just how much I go through for you guys. I have actually kicked my wife out of the bedroom in order to be able to cast this game. So, you know, that's no mean achievement, first of all, because she doesn't like to be kicked out of the bedroom. But luckily we already had sex this morning, and I have to lower my volume, otherwise she might hear me. So, anyway, so since we already had sex, I have no problems kicking her out. And MSL seems to be buffering a little bit. MBC seems to be buffering a little bit more so than it was before. Anyway, garlic pepper. I could potentially use the other cast, but then I wouldn't be able to stay in the chat room. I'd have to close sc2.org if I use the other stream. So I think since most people are in here, it makes sense to use this cast. And hopefully, I mean, you guys should know how to sync anyway, since Siku told you guys. So that should probably be better on the P2P stream. Anyway, sAviOr versus FirebatHero. First of all, why the hell did FirebatHero change his nick to Brack? I thought FirebatHero is a pretty cool nick, and I don't see any reason why he should change it. Okay, looks like I'm going to have to end up using the other stream if this stream keeps buffering continuously. So yeah, first of all, I don't understand why he changed his nick to Brack, because that doesn't really mean anything, unless I suppose maybe if you know Korean it means something in Korean, but it sounds like a pretty crap nick to me. I think FirebatHero is quite cool. And speaking of FirebatHero, he has been on a hot streak lately. He has been absolutely on fire. He's been demolishing opponents left, right, and center, and along with Stork, he has been the reason why Samson Khan are doing so well in the Pro League right now, and he has been playing some excellent StarCraft, really good StarCraft. And unfortunately for some good players, FirebatHero has been playing really well. uloveOov, for example, crashed out to FirebatHero in the MSL, and I was very sorry to see uloveOov go out. And that was despite the fact that uloveOov was playing some pretty solid StarCraft, some pretty good, solid all-round StarCraft. But nevertheless, he could not account for FirebatHero, and he ended up losing to him. And FirebatHero just showed how much on form he is yesterday in that game versus Nada on Python, where it looked like he was down and out for a few minutes, and yet he managed to come back in the game. You could argue that Nada didn't know about his expo at the 11 o'clock position, and had Nada known about that expo, then Nada would have killed all those SCVs, and that would have made a difference in the game. But nevertheless, FirebatHero has been in stunning form, but it has been remarked that he hasn't played a lot of versus Zerg games recently, so it remains to be seen whether or not his form, which has primarily displayed itself in Terran versus Terran matchups. We haven't seen him even play a lot of Terran versus Protoss. Primarily we've seen him play a lot of Terran versus Terran. So, and you can see they're just showing his versus Terran is 4-1, and Zerg and Protoss are 1-1. So it just goes to show that, you know, you can't say anything for definite. I think a few people are predicting that FirebatHero might defeat sAviOr, and I think a lot of those predictions come on the back of sAviOr's defeat to Iris day before yesterday in the OSL, and I think that's a joke. I think to say that sAviOr is, you know, slumping or not in form or not playing well based on that game, I think that's a joke, because first of all, Iris is sAviOr's teammate who knows his style really well. And again, for syncing purposes, I'm just seeing the kind of broad overview of FirebatHero seems to be bent over. Yeah, I'm just looking. Okay, he just straightened up. So and they're just displaying his stats over him now. So just for anyone who needs to sync their stream to me. And I don't think Siku is online today, but I'm sure a few other people by now know how to sync, so they could probably tell you if you ask in the chat. Anyway, excuse me, sorry. So what I was saying was that even though sAviOr lost to Iris, I don't think it means much, because first of all, Iris found that completely imbalanced position to position his Marines behind sAviOr's mineral line at his natural expo on Python, to which sAviOr could only attack with one Zergling at a time. And obviously sAviOr was unaware of that position existing, because had he known that, he wouldn't have allowed Iris to get back in that position. He probably would have used his drones earlier, which he didn't, obviously, in that matchup. And once Iris got in that position, that changed the entire focus of the game. And I think it just threw sAviOr completely off balance, because you did see him make a few mistakes. You did see his micro be relatively loose. He sacrificed a lot of Zerglings, and he just struggled to come up with an answer to what FirebatHero did, to what Iris did. And I think he was caught completely off guard there, which is very rare to see something like that for sAviOr. And you can see sAviOr just fidgeting a little bit in his chair, and he looks nervous. I think that loss against Iris is going to do him a world of good, at least in the MSL, because I think it's woken him up to the fact that he can't win as easily as he wants to. But if you guys read the recent article on TeamLiquid.net, and I'm just going to go to Team Liquid just for a second to see who the author of that article was, just so I can give you credit. Actually, I don't want to load that up. But anyway, that was a fantastic article. I think it was Snowflake who wrote that article, and it was just an amazing article. And mad props to Snowflake for that article. Really, really good write-up. But you can see from that sAviOr has already in the past 6 months, in this 6 months, played more games of StarCraft than he played in the entire year last year. So it just goes to show you the level. And if we talk about Nada and we talk about burnout and fatigue and the fact that if you play Blockbuster versus Maestro, that's what's on my screen right now. If you play enough StarCraft, you're bound to lose a few games here and there. And sAviOr has certainly been playing a lot of StarCraft, and he set himself a goal out of qualifying for the World Cyber Games, so I'm sure that's taking up a lot of his attentions as well, considering the fact that he hasn't played a lot in the Pro League for CJ recently, and you can see that reflected in CJ's results. They haven't been doing as well because sAviOr hasn't been playing a lot of 1v1s. But nevertheless, I think to count sAviOr out, or to say that sAviOr is not in form based on that one game versus Iris, where Iris caught him completely by surprise with that maneuver, I think is really jumping the gun a little too much. I think today will be a much better test. It's a best of 5, and we will really see whether or not sAviOr has had a mini slump or whatever. But again, I mean, you look at Nada, he's lost a few games, but he's nevertheless still playing some excellent StarCraft. He played very well against FirebatHero yesterday and was unfortunate to lose out. And FirebatHero really, along with Stork for Samson Khan, has been in just absolutely stunning, dominant form. I feel really bad for uOov that he came up against FirebatHero at such an early stage, because had he not, uOov probably would have been able to progress much further in the tournament. Had it been uOov versus 910 instead of Zelos, we would have probably not be seeing 910 versus Stork on Thursday. So I do think that it was a little bit unfair towards uOov. Well, not unfair, but it was a little bit unlucky for uOov, because FirebatHero has been in stunning form, and it'll be interesting to see whether he can carry over that stunning form into the matchup today versus sAviOr. But I think you have to remark on the fact that sAviOr probably has been practicing more Terran versus Zerg, especially considering the fact that he was playing versus. I think you can pause by right-clicking. Actually, I'm not sure how you can pause. I'm not sure how you can sync the stream. Siku figured out, so he knows. Anyway, as I was saying, and Lone Wolf, can you please turn your mic off, because you're probably giving a few people echoes with your mic. So as I was saying, I think FirebatHero has been practicing a lot versus Terran versus Terran. That's most of the matchups we've seen him play recently has been Terran versus Terran. And considering the fact that he played Terran versus Terran in the Pro League yesterday, and before that, so it's more than likely that that's what he's been practicing for, and he probably hasn't had as much time to prepare for this matchup. sAviOr, on the other hand, has been primarily playing Zerg versus Terran recently. Most of his matches have been against Terran opponents, probably because there's so many Terran opponents. And obviously the reason behind both of those guys playing so many games against Terrans is because so many Terrans have gotten through to the qualifiers and have been advancing well in the tournament, and maybe that suggests map imbalance, maybe it doesn't. I'm not going to comment on that for fear of offending our Terran fans. So it looks like the match is starting up now. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And the first matchup is actually on Python. I'm sorry I started my cast a little bit late today, so I didn't get a lot of time to talk about the different maps. But the first map is Python, and Python is really my baby. I just love it. And I have actually last week sent a box of chocolates over to the inventor of Python, who coincidentally apparently actually is forced to work under slave-like conditions. He's tied up to a chain in a cave somewhere and forced to churn out maps for MBC Game. So down with that sort of thing. But thankfully it's produced such a great map for us, and I just absolutely adore this map. We haven't seen a single boring game on it. Even bad players become entertaining on this matchup. We saw Zelos versus 910, which was a decidedly average game, and nevertheless it was entertaining. So sAviOr scouting clockwise on this occasion. Usually he likes to scout counterclockwise, but it doesn't matter because we've got cross positions. These are the same positions that we saw versus Iris. So it'll be interesting to see if FirebatHero goes for a similar kind of build like Iris, if he goes for the 2 barracks into expansion, which is what we saw Iris do. The thing about this map is there's so many builds that are viable on it, but one thing that I think Iris realized that other Terran players perhaps have not realized versus Zerg on this map is that pressuring the Zerg early and quickly is very important. And sAviOr is going to go for a rush. Oh my god! sAviOr has gone for 7 pool, and sAviOr is going for a Zergling rush, and this is going to be disastrous. I think this is a big mistake by sAviOr, because there's such a huge distance between the map on these between the two players' spawn locations on the map, and I think this is going to be absolutely disastrous for sAviOr. sAviOr just using the extractor trick to get himself a couple of extra drones. I don't think this rush is going to work. The only way this rush could have worked is if FirebatHero had gone for a command center straight away, if he'd gone for 14cc, and maybe that's what sAviOr was hoping for, and I just don't see this rush paying off for sAviOr. sAviOr going for the gutsy move. He is known to be willing to take these kind of risks early on in the game. The fact of the matter is that he has not found FirebatHero's base, and he's not going to find it till quite late, because he's going to now send that drone probably towards the 3 o'clock base, and FirebatHero is obviously at 12 o'clock position, sAviOr's at 6 o'clock. FirebatHero sending his SCV out. FirebatHero is probably going to have more than enough time to block that ramp and to defend that ramp, and sAviOr going for the 7 pool, I just don't think it's going to pay off. He's going to find himself behind in economy. He would have been much better off going for a standard strategy. I think that game against Iris yesterday rattled sAviOr more than we realized, and more than probably he realized, and his spawning pool is up, so sAviOr's Zerglings are going to be popping out at any second. sAviOr is going to put down that hatchery, so to try and make up for the fact that he's going for those Zerglings first. Maybe if he can do a little bit of damage to FirebatHero's economy, that might help. But FirebatHero is SCV is going to now see sAviOr's Zerglings as he comes down into to scout sAviOr's base, and FirebatHero is going to have plenty of time to prepare. FirebatHero has seen those Zerglings, so FirebatHero knows exactly what sAviOr is up to, and sAviOr, unfortunately, by the time he comes up, FirebatHero might even have a bunker up, or FirebatHero will at least have a few SCVs blocking his ramp, and so sAviOr unable to deny the scout to FirebatHero in his main. FirebatHero is going to know that sAviOr has gone for a 7 pool, and this is going to be a very tough game for sAviOr now, because FirebatHero has gone for a pretty standard build. FirebatHero has already blocked his ramp with 3 SCVs and 2 Marines, and he's pumping Marines out from that barracks, so there's no way sAviOr's 6 Zerglings are going to do any damage to FirebatHero. He might kill off one of those SCVs if he's lucky, and sAviOr is forced to just sit outside. So that's going to slow sAviOr down a lot, because he didn't go for that second hatchery early enough. He hasn't gone for a standard 3 hatchery build, which means he's going to be slowed down in getting his defense up, slowed down in getting his Sunkens up. FirebatHero is not going to be slowed down, though. I do note FirebatHero has not yet put up that refinery, and FirebatHero has actually taken the opportunity to start up his command center. So FirebatHero, realizing that sAviOr's rush has failed, is going to take the advantage is going to take the opportunity to get an economic advantage versus sAviOr, and that spells very bad news for sAviOr. And you've just got to feel that FirebatHero is now got an advantage in this game, and sAviOr is going to have to work very hard to come back and to try and win this game. So sAviOr now building up that 3rd hatchery, but the fact that he went for those Lings early on means that he has sacrificed his economy. But luckily for him, FirebatHero is going for that command center, so even though sAviOr doesn't know that FirebatHero is going for that command center behind that ramp, and FirebatHero's SCV is still scouting around sAviOr's main, but even though sAviOr doesn't know that FirebatHero is going for that command center, sAviOr's 3rd hatchery is the right decision. So luckily for him, he went for the 3rd hatchery. FirebatHero could potentially have gone for that 2nd barracks and gone for the academy instead of going for that command center. But I guess FirebatHero realizes that because sAviOr didn't go for the 3 hatchery build, because sAviOr's rush failed, that means that sAviOr is not going to have that economic advantage that he usually has. He's not going to be able to macro as well, and he's taken the opportunity to give himself the advantage in the game. And FirebatHero now building his refinery and starting up his academy. So sAviOr is going to find himself in a lot of trouble here, because FirebatHero is going to be able to pressure him relatively quickly with a Medic and Marine force, and sAviOr, because he went so late with his 2nd and 3rd hatchery, is going to be forced to expend further resources on Sunkens to defend against FirebatHero's push, and sAviOr has started up his lair tech. So as soon as the SCV was killed, sAviOr has started up that lair tech. So sAviOr probably not far behind in terms of his tech, but you've got to feel that he's not going to have as many Mutalisks as early as he would have. He's not going to be able to control the game and control the map as much as he likes to, and more importantly, he's not going to be able to pressure FirebatHero. He's not going to be able to get that 3rd gas, and sAviOr really at risk here of being exposed to the same thing that happened to him with Iris. If FirebatHero can sneak some drones behind that sunken line, sAviOr might find himself in trouble. So sAviOr needs to set up a couple of Sunkens near the top of his main, or at least a Sunken near the top of his natural expo, to make sure that FirebatHero doesn't sneak in by the back route. And FirebatHero now setting up his 3rd barracks. sAviOr does usually like to take that 3rd expo to get that extra gas. The 2nd expo, sorry, with the 4th hatchery to get that extra gas. But I think he's going to have a hard time doing that. And that's one of the reasons why uloveOov was able to struggle so much. Why uloveOov struggled so much against sAviOr was because he had that extra gas, because sAviOr controlled the map with his Mutalisks. And I think sAviOr going for the all-in rush strategy this time, luckily for him, it didn't result in him losing the game straight away. And FirebatHero sending another SCV down to scout. sAviOr has yet to put up a single Sunken, but he has his lair up, and he has started up his spire now. FirebatHero yet to push out. So this is going to be a critical phase for sAviOr. He needs to try and hold this out without wasting too many resources. And FirebatHero is going to get up that ramp, and sAviOr should have blocked that ramp with a drone or something. FirebatHero is going to get up that ramp and know exactly the state of sAviOr's tech. FirebatHero, though, thus far continued to sit in his base. I think that's a mistake. I think he's getting a little bit overconfident of the fact that sAviOr did try for that rush, and that rush failed. FirebatHero finally moving out with his Medic and Marine group. He's got a couple of medics and he's got about 10 Marines. He's got a full control group there. FirebatHero looks like he's finally moving out. sAviOr has done an excellent job with that handful of Zerglings that he's got positioned outside FirebatHero's natural expo, of keeping FirebatHero back, of stopping FirebatHero from pressuring him. So sAviOr using those initial Zerglings quite well to pressure FirebatHero a little bit and stop him from pressuring sAviOr in turn, which has allowed sAviOr to not be forced to expend too many resources on Sunkens. He's only had to build a single Sunken, whereas if FirebatHero was knocking on his door, he would probably need 3 or 4 Sunkens. But but it's not going to be long before that American Marine group moves out. And FirebatHero finally feels he's got enough to move out. He's got a second kind of group of Marines that's sitting in his National Expo. FirebatHero already has that engineering bay up, so that gives you a hint of how far behind sAviOr is on his Mutalists. And again, by this stage, sAviOr would probably be sending his drone out to get ready to put up that Expo as soon as his Mutalists pop out. And the fact that he hasn't been able to do that is a result of that risk he took going for that 6-pool strategy. Excuse me, sAviOr just again moving those Zerglings around, trying to buy himself time, and he has got that Spire up, so you've got to feel that he's going to have his Mutalist probably pop out just before FirebatHero's American Marine group arrives at his main, and sAviOr just parlaying with FirebatHero, and FirebatHero with the scan at the bottom right of the map. He's just scanned the 5 o'clock location because, as we all know, as I've been saying already, sAviOr likes to go for that third Expo, and that would be the most for that third gas and an extra Expo, and that would be the most logical position for sAviOr to go for that for. I do see something. I think that's just an overall hovering over the 7 o'clock position. I don't think sAviOr would have had the resources to get an extra tech. sAviOr now building a Hydralisk den in his National Expo, and sAviOr's got his first group of Mutalists out, so FirebatHero is going to be forced to defend. I'm not sure how many choices he has, but FirebatHero, again, sAviOr's Mutalist coming out relatively late, so FirebatHero has had more than enough time, and sAviOr finds himself in a very similar position to where, and sAviOr now going for the third Expo. That's fairly risky. He's going for that third Expo at the 3 o'clock position, which is really close to FirebatHero, easily vulnerable to dropship play, and also a long supply route for sAviOr's unit, so sAviOr needs to at least get a couple of lurkers out there, and that's probably why he's gone for that early Hydralisk den, because he realized he needs that third gas and that extra Expo to actually compete in this game. So sAviOr doing a good job of trying to fight back in this matchup. Certainly he's in a better position now than he was in the game versus Iris, and I think the primary reason behind that obviously is the fact that even though he went for that early rush, and sAviOr seems to have found a weakness in Iris's air defense, he's actually managed to sneak his Mutalist around the back. He just picked up a couple of SCVs, he's picked up a couple of medics there, and sAviOr just doing damage to Iris' economy. Brilliant play by sAviOr. Sorry, not Iris, FirebatHero. FirebatHero didn't position a turret to cover that back area of his base. He's now been forced to bring back his Marines, and sAviOr has done significant damage to FirebatHero's economy. He's killed off a couple of medics, a few Marines, and an SCV, and it looks like sAviOr is just going to try and take out that turret as well. So sAviOr doing a brilliant job of keeping FirebatHero pinned back in his base, and I think FirebatHero has been giving too much respect to sAviOr here. FirebatHero had that point in time where he had a full medic and Marine group, and he had about 4 or 5 Marines to also defend his base. FirebatHero has got his factory and machine shop up, so I guess FirebatHero is happy to sit in his base and consolidate and wait for that tank and science vessel to pop up so that he can just go for the standard Terran push versus sAviOr. He seems to be satisfied to do that. I think that might be a risk if he goes for that. I don't think he's aware of sAviOr's expansion at 3 o'clock. He scanned the 5 o'clock base and was satisfied that sAviOr did not go for an expansion there. That is the most logical choice. So the move by sAviOr, and FirebatHero has now got a turret to defend the backline and his minerals. sAviOr just going to try and take that turret out, and he should be able to pick that turret off, and once again FirebatHero is going to be forced to defend his Marines, and sAviOr once again, sAviOr trying to focus on the gas SCVs of FirebatHero, and FirebatHero now pushing forward with his medic and Marine group. I'm not sure how many Sunkans have. sAviOr is building a few lurkers, but I don't think they're going to be pop out in time, and sAviOr might get very unlucky and lose those lurkers, and FirebatHero sending the SCV to scout inside, and sAviOr managed to pick off that SCV, but FirebatHero now knows that sAviOr has got that expansion up at the 3 o'clock position. sAviOr though does have his Mutalist and his Zerglings, so he should be able to defend that with successful Mutalist harass. His lurkers are going to pop up. Hopefully sAviOr doesn't lose his lurkers. sAviOr might actually lose his lurkers because those lurkers look to be on the minimap moving towards that expansion, but FirebatHero is ahead of that, so sAviOr might find himself in trouble, and sAviOr just holding that ramp. Brilliant play by sAviOr. He's using the fact that the Marines are not going to be able to see it, and FirebatHero anticipating those lurkers. sAviOr buries the lurkers. He might end up losing the lurkers here if the scan goes off. FirebatHero didn't scan. That's inexplicable play by FirebatHero, and FirebatHero microing quite poorly that medic and Marine group, but he's got another group ready to push out, and that's going to slow FirebatHero's attack down a lot. That was very bad play by FirebatHero. I have to say that was poor play. He did not take down those lurkers a single scan. He has an academy up. He should have scanned and killed off those lurkers. He shouldn't have gotten himself pincered the way that he did, but brilliant play by sAviOr. So sAviOr has definitely fought himself back into this match, and the match at the very least on even terms, if not a slight advantage with sAviOr. But FirebatHero is ready to push out. sAviOr though is not too far behind in tech. I did see him put that Queen's Nest up earlier, so he's not too far behind. FirebatHero is going to probably try and focus on this expansion at the 9 o'clock position, at the 3 o'clock position of sAviOr's, and this would be the ideal time for sAviOr to potentially drop a drone at the 7 o'clock position and maybe set up an expansion there, but obviously that's going to require him getting the drop check, which he's now completed his hive. So sAviOr is not too far behind in Fires. The fact that FirebatHero lost that American Marine group to sAviOr's pincer attack is bad for FirebatHero because of the fact that it's going to disable him, it's going to slow him down from using his turn push versus sAviOr, and sAviOr now controlling the middle of the map just as he did versus iloveOov, and FirebatHero needs to do something around here. He needs to put pressure on sAviOr, and FirebatHero finally has a substantial force. He's got 3 siege tanks quite significantly as well as a science vessel. I don't see any Scourge for sAviOr. sAviOr is going to need to take that science vessel out, and FirebatHero is up to his 5th and 6th barracks now. He's building his 5th and 6th barracks. sAviOr just scouting around with his Mutalists just to make sure that FirebatHero doesn't have extra forces elsewhere. sAviOr does have a few Scourge out ready for that science vessel, and one of the brilliant things about sAviOr's play, sAviOr's Zerg versus Terran play, is his absolute meticulous use of Scourges, and sAviOr's hidden lurkers just revealed. So sAviOr's got his forces spread around the map, and he's doing a brilliant job. He's using the wide space, and the wide open space on Python is what allows sAviOr to do this. And sAviOr might find his forces just, and FirebatHero just trying to make sure that he doesn't get taken from behind, that he doesn't have any of sAviOr's forces lingering behind to attack him from the rear. He wants to present a united front, a united flank to sAviOr's forces, and sAviOr had those positioned, but sAviOr had those forces positioned exactly for that purpose. But FirebatHero, with some excellent micro and some excellent anticipation, using that SCV to scout, found that base. And sAviOr, though, does have FirebatHero has got a dropship up, so it looks like he's going to be going for a drop at that 3 o'clock base, but sAviOr has got that base more than adequately defended, and FirebatHero is just jockeying for position around the map. But this is really poor by FirebatHero. He needs to pressure sAviOr somewhere, and he hasn't been able to do that. I guess sAviOr has really done a brilliant job of forcing FirebatHero to not really pressure him well, by positioning his forces around the map, by forcing FirebatHero to stay back. And FirebatHero looks like he's actually going to go for a drop in sAviOr's main, but that's not going to pay off for him because sAviOr does have Scourges. But sAviOr's going to scout that dropship. That dropship is going to get taken out by the Mutalisk, so FirebatHero is going to lose that dropship because he's not going to be able to drop the main. The Scourge comes in, and FirebatHero is going to lose that dropship. The dropship gets taken out. Brilliant play by sAviOr. Great anticipation, great positioning of that Scourges, and sAviOr just maneuvering his forces around the map. sAviOr has done a great job of maneuvering his forces and keeping FirebatHero on the back foot, not allowing FirebatHero to pressure him. I have to say this is absolutely poor by FirebatHero. After sAviOr's initial rush failed, he should have been able to pressure sAviOr a lot, and he hasn't pressured sAviOr at all. And sAviOr's got his defilers gen up, and you've got to feel that even though FirebatHero has amassed a significant number of forces, sAviOr really has sAviOr has got map control. sAviOr has now got the economic advantage, most certainly, and you've got to feel that sAviOr has got the advantage in this game right now. sAviOr once again, and sAviOr in a rare display, not microing his Scourges well. Very rare for sAviOr to do that. It looks like sAviOr might be trying to set up an expansion at the 5 o'clock position as well, and FirebatHero going for that. And sAviOr now not controlling those lurkers. sAviOr just burning those lurkers behind FirebatHero's troops, trying to pincer FirebatHero. sAviOr fighting without things of defilers, and FirebatHero is going to find his troops pincer. FirebatHero doesn't need to scan because he has the science vessel, and sAviOr lost those 3 lurkers, but he did manage to kill off a couple of tanks and force FirebatHero to go and siege, but he also killed off quite a few medics and marines there. So FirebatHero's large army reduced somewhat, and that's going to again limit his ability to fight. And FirebatHero now setting up an expansion at the 11 o'clock position. I don't think sAviOr is aware of that. sAviOr is going to need to scout that and take that out if he wants to keep the economic advantage. And FirebatHero persisting on trying to pressure that expansion at 3 o'clock, where sAviOr is now trying to take the natural off that expansion. And FirebatHero looks like he should be able to take that natural out, stop sAviOr from at least planting that natural expansion. FirebatHero has moved in with his tanks and his medic marine force and got a second group, but sAviOr is going to fire up. sAviOr is going to be able to defend that. Defiler swarm goes up all over FirebatHero's troops, and FirebatHero is going to find his forces taken out. FirebatHero's tanks stuck in the middle. FirebatHero's medic and marines maneuver back, and he successfully counters that. He successfully managed to save his medic and marines, but he lost all his tanks there. He lost all 3 of his tanks. He did manage to save his science vessel as well, though. So sAviOr once again defending that base quite successfully, and sAviOr has now got map control, so FirebatHero is going to find himself in a world of trouble. FirebatHero does have that expansion now at the 11 o'clock position, but you've got to feel that if sAviOr discovers that expansion, FirebatHero is not going to have enough to defend against it. FirebatHero also has not been able to mass up a significant number of science vessels. He only has 1 science vessel in action at the moment in the current battle, and that's definitely slowing down his advance versus sAviOr. sAviOr now has got that expansion at sAviOr really putting up expansions all over the map, and in true Zerg form is spreading all over the map. And once again, sAviOr using his defilers liberally. sAviOr's defiler play is always just the epitome of what defiler play should be like. And FirebatHero's science vessel is going to get taken out by these Scourges. sAviOr takes out yet another science vessel, so FirebatHero finding himself in real trouble here. FirebatHero really, I have to say that FirebatHero's play has not been up to scratch. I don't feel FirebatHero has done a good job in this game, and FirebatHero without the science vessel is going to walk right on top of those lurkers and going to lose that tank. FirebatHero almost loses the tank. sAviOr unburies those lurkers. There was no need for him to do that because FirebatHero was just walking right into them. FirebatHero though has brought 3 science vessels together now, and he's got a significant force. He's trying to focus on that expansion at the 3 o'clock position. sAviOr still doesn't. sAviOr has found that expansion in the 11 o'clock position, so you can expect a counter from sAviOr the moment he is able to free up a few units for that. But right now FirebatHero is doing a decent job of keeping him pressured at that 3 o'clock position. So we've got an intense game on our hands here, and FirebatHero trying to keep sAviOr's defilers down, continually irradiating them. And sAviOr plague goes off, and a bunch of FirebatHero's units get caught in that plague. FirebatHero does manage to get an SCV down at the 5 o'clock position and scout sAviOr's expansion there. So sAviOr has got certainly the economic advantage. He does have control of the map at the moment. I suppose he's content to do that. He doesn't feel the need to actually pressure and try and go on the offensive against FirebatHero. Thus far, sAviOr has been content on whittling down FirebatHero's forces. FirebatHero now once again moving out with his army towards that base at the 3 o'clock position. sAviOr doesn't have a lot of forces defending it there, so FirebatHero might actually be able to take it out quickly before sAviOr can actually come back with his force. And those science vessels in a precarious position. If sAviOr had a couple of Scourges there, he would have been able to take them out. sAviOr just trying to get at FirebatHero from behind. His defiler finally arrives. FirebatHero has though put up, as FirebatHero kills the Defiler just as the swarm goes up, so sAviOr's not going to be able to set up swarm over that tank, and that's going to prevent sAviOr from defending that base. sAviOr though is countering at FirebatHero's base at the 5 o'clock position. FirebatHero does have a bunker up there, and I'm not sure how much damage these Zerglings on the order are going to do against that Medic and Marine group. sAviOr though with a handful of Zerglings trying to take out that base, and that's going to be an unsuccessful counter. FirebatHero brilliantly, sAviOr once again trying to take that out. sAviOr has been able to take out the tank, but FirebatHero should be able to kill off that hatchery. FirebatHero fighting with science vessels and Medic and Marines, and FirebatHero just needs to focus that hatchery down and take it down. FirebatHero, excellent micro runs. FirebatHero kills off the lurkers. FirebatHero maneuvering that small Medic and Marine group, so FirebatHero's main force did get taken out, but he still managed to maneuver that Medic and Marine group and do significant damage with his science vessels and Medic and Marines versus sAviOr. But sAviOr has managed to save that expansion at 3 o'clock. That's a little bit inexplicable to me. That hatchery had very little health left, and FirebatHero finished it out. But FirebatHero continuing to replace his losses very quickly, and sAviOr is struggling a little bit to keep up here with the flow of the game, because FirebatHero has got a significant army now moving down towards sAviOr's main. He's actually moving, or is he? FirebatHero himself is setting up an expansion now at the 9 o'clock position, and sAviOr is just moving out with a small group of Zerglings and Defilers. So sAviOr fighting with skeleton forces, doing an excellent job of holding FirebatHero with a small number of troops, but you've got to feel that FirebatHero is now actually trying to somehow managing to gain the upper hand versus sAviOr. sAviOr now putting up that ultralisk cavalry. He doesn't seem to have a large army anywhere on the map. His forces do seem to be scattered. He does have a larger area of the map to defend. But sAviOr this time has managed to get his forces in position in time. And sAviOr with Scourges going up, and sAviOr's going to lose about 6 Scourges. It's very careless play by sAviOr there, losing about 6 Scourges and not killing any of the science vessels. And sAviOr here is making a big mistake. He's allowing FirebatHero to amass those science vessels. FirebatHero now has about 4 or 5 science vessels in his main group, and sAviOr is allowing FirebatHero, and sAviOr's swarm goes up, so sAviOr's going to be able to hold that defense for a little bit longer. But sAviOr's making a big mistake of allowing FirebatHero to amass those science vessels. That's a little bit careless defiler play by careless Scourge play by sAviOr. FirebatHero inexplicably moves those tanks into sAviOr's Natural Expo at the 3 o'clock base, and that's a big mistake by FirebatHero, because sAviOr was able to take that tank out. That's going to slow down FirebatHero sieging that expansion a little bit. I don't think sAviOr will mind too much, because he has got a couple more expansions down, and sAviOr once again not microing those Scourges as he should, losing another group of Scourges to Medics and Marines. And this time FirebatHero tried to drop in sAviOr's main, and sAviOr with the Scourge manages to counter the drop, but FirebatHero's dropship survives, and FirebatHero now has actually managed to drop at sAviOr's Expo at the 5 o'clock position. So FirebatHero might be able to do some damage to the Expo, but sAviOr does have forces defending it. sAviOr does have lurkers and Zerglings positioned there, so FirebatHero, but however FirebatHero is going to be able to kill off a few of those drones. Just Marines there, no medics to support them, so those Marines are going to be taken out quite quickly. sAviOr still struggling to defend that base at the 3 o'clock position. FirebatHero moving those Marines in. sAviOr has got swarm up, but there's nothing under that swarm to fight against those Marines. sAviOr now, just by the skin of his teeth, saving that Expo, manages to get a couple of lurkers up and buried under that swarm, and he's just going to take out this tank of FirebatHero. sAviOr successfully takes out the down. Brilliant Zergling control, but I have to say that sAviOr has not done enough damage to FirebatHero's science vessels. He needs to kill those science vessels, because otherwise he's going to find himself fighting an uphill battle. sAviOr has got those lurkers, and FirebatHero constantly scouting with SCVs. FirebatHero now with a group of about 6 or 7 science vessels, and that is the most significant feature of the game right now, the fact that FirebatHero has those 7 science vessels. sAviOr needs to do something about that. He needs to plague them and use a Mutalisk or something, or he's going to find himself unable to combat the plague of irradiates that was going to go off against him. And FirebatHero doing an excellent job of keeping sAviOr on the back foot, and FirebatHero is just able to plague at will. FirebatHero with those science vessels, sAviOr is going to be able to take one of them down. sAviOr managed to take 2 of the science vessels down, but his Scourges get taken out. FirebatHero won't mind that though, because he's pumping those science vessels at a fierce rate. And sAviOr finally with the plague. sAviOr manages to plague all of FirebatHero's science vessels, and someone seems to have moved me. Okay, someone moved me in the channel. Thanks for that PM. I'm back in now, guys. So I hope I wasn't in the channel I wasn't moved for too long. If that happens, just send me a PM to pop me out. I don't know who did that. Unfortunately, some people mess around. sAviOr's got his ultralisk out though, and so you've got to feel that sAviOr, with the help of those ultralisks, is going to be able to do some significant. FirebatHero now going for sAviOr's economy. sAviOr doesn't have burrow for his units, and FirebatHero trying to take out that Expo at the 7 o'clock. He's been unsuccessful in taking out that Expo at the 5 o'clock position, but all of those science vessels have been plagued, so all sAviOr needs is a Mutalisk now to take out the science vessels, and FirebatHero has set up defense on the top of that ramp, and sAviOr now with the Defiler. sAviOr should be able to take those troops out, but that Defiler finally casting Swarm. FirebatHero maneuvering his Medic and Marine forces excellently. sAviOr FirebatHero using the best advantage of the position of the map, and now sAviOr finally should be able to take out those science vessels, because those Medic and Marines are focused on fighting sAviOr's unit, and sAviOr takes out almost all of FirebatHero's science vessels. FirebatHero with only 2 science vessels remaining, and sAviOr brilliantly with that one plague has done an excellent job, and sAviOr using those Scourges to maximum effect, trying to use a single Scourge per science vessel because they were so low on health. He didn't need to use 2 Scourges per science vessel. I'm just going to check one second to make sure I'm in the right channel still with you guys, and I think I am, so that's excellent. So it does look like sAviOr has established himself with a firm advantage on this game, but you still can't say anything because FirebatHero has got a lot of expansions, and this is an absolutely brilliant game between these two players, both keeping each other on their toes. I've got to feel that FirebatHero's micro and his early game lack of pressuring against sAviOr has let him down a little bit, and sAviOr now has built up a substantial force of Ultralisk. FirebatHero, though, equal to sAviOr in number of expansions, and sAviOr has constantly been on the defensive this entire game, and that's one thing that you have to remark on, that sAviOr has been mainly on the defensive. And FirebatHero does manage to drop that Expo at the 3 o'clock position. He's got a large group of American Marines. He had that dropship D-Matrix, but that group of American Marines is not going to be able to kill that Expo, I do feel, because sAviOr does have a couple of Sunkens. He also has an Nihilus Canal there. And sAviOr now just has a couple of Hydralisks to counter those science vessels, and sAviOr going in without Defiler. His Defiler got taken out. He wasn't able to swarm, and so he lost a lot of troops to that force of FirebatHeroes on the center of the map, and sAviOr just using a group of Zerglings and Ultras to take out that force at the 3 o'clock expansion. FirebatHero now forced to run in, and he's going to get killed off by the Sunkens, so FirebatHero not really able to do much damage. FirebatHero trying to take out the Nihilus Canal, but it survives. Brilliant play by sAviOr. FirebatHero once again going for that expansion at 7 o'clock. You've got to feel that FirebatHero is doing a great job of pressuring sAviOr constantly throughout this game, and that sAviOr has been on the defensive pretty much just surviving by the skin of his teeth. Even though sAviOr has teched up to Ultralisk, FirebatHero has got his units upgraded as well, and sAviOr is having a tough time killing those units with his, even though he does have Ultralisk. And sAviOr really needs a Defiler to supplement that group of Ultralisk there. FirebatHero D-matrixing that tank. Brilliant play by FirebatHero, but he's going to find his forces pincered. Scourge goes out, but that Scourge gets taken out before it was killed by the Marines. That Scourge gets killed by the Marines before he could take out the science vessel. And sAviOr once again successful defense, but sAviOr really needs to do something. He needs to catch a breath and find a way of going on the offensive versus FirebatHero, because he is constantly defending. Even though he's had those expansions up for longer, he has been constantly defending the entire game, and he seems to be content to be constantly defending the entire game. And I believe that is a big mistake. sAviOr maybe needs to go for dropship technology. And sAviOr now trying to get up that ramp at the 9 o'clock position. Finally, he's discovered that expansion of FirebatHeroes, but he's unable to get that ramp. The expansion is blocked, and sAviOr needs a Defiler or some Zerglings to be able to take that. sAviOr though is able to attack the Expo and do some damage to it. FirebatHero force lift the command center, but FirebatHero's got reinforcements streaming in, and FirebatHero is gonna, and sAviOr is forced to retreat with those 3 Ultralisks, not able to get that ramp, not able to take out expansions. FirebatHero has got as many, if not more, expansions than sAviOr at this stage, and that's gonna be a huge source of trouble for sAviOr, because even though he has been combating excellently and probably, in my view, microing better than FirebatHero thus far through the game, he has not been on the offensive at all, and he has allowed FirebatHero to be on the offensive. He has allowed himself to stay on the defensive and allowed FirebatHero to establish all those expansions, and therefore FirebatHero is able to replenish his losses as quickly, if not quicker, than sAviOr. And sAviOr now going for another big battle in the center of the map. FirebatHero is quickly, despite the fact that he had all his science vessels taken out only a short while ago. FirebatHero has a massive group of 8 science vessels quickly, but sAviOr is going to be able to take out this group of FirebatHeroes. And you've got to feel that sAviOr should now counter at that 9 o'clock expansion. Now that he's forced FirebatHero to retreat, he should take everything he has and go for the expansion at 9 o'clock. Ignore the expansion at 11 o'clock, because that expansion has had most of its minerals used up already, but it looks like sAviOr has decided to go for that expansion at the 11 o'clock position. I feel that's a mistake. Playing again, excellent play by sAviOr, a lot of FirebatHero's units, and FirebatHero forced to lift that command center, and sAviOr needs to kill off as many of these SCVs as possible. FirebatHero brilliantly trying to rescue those SCVs. FirebatHero has got reinforcements pouring in. sAviOr now with a lurker and a group of Zerglings has once again forced FirebatHero to lift that natural Expo at the 9 o'clock position, but FirebatHero still has his main at the 9 o'clock Expo secured. So sAviOr now finally on the offensive for the first time in this game, managing to get and take out, or at least force FirebatHero to temporarily disable that expansion. FirebatHero's going to get taken out by the lurkers. All those SCVs streaming through a lurker. That lurker seems to have been unstoppable, and those SCVs have been stopped by their own units on the ramp, not able to get up that ramp, and FirebatHero is going to end up losing all those SCVs. That was very careless by FirebatHero. Defiler's play goes off on on that ramp, and sAviOr once again trying to keep FirebatHero under the pressure in the middle of the map, but FirebatHero with those 8 science vessels, sAviOr's going to have a tough time combating against it. And sAviOr now finally, FirebatHero has retaken the expansion at the 11 o'clock position, and sAviOr now trying to do damage to the 9 o'clock Expo. So finally FirebatHero being forced in defense a little bit, and sAviOr is going to do some damage to his science vessels. That swarm and lurkers hidden under it, slowing FirebatHero's reinforcements down significantly. FirebatHero unable to reinforce that 9 o'clock base now. He is finally coming out, and that lurker is carelessly not buried under the swarm. FirebatHero has re-established himself at the 11 o'clock position. sAviOr now with a handful of forces attacking at multiple points, trying to keep FirebatHero. sAviOr was going to try and infest that command center, but he wasn't able to because there wasn't enough damage done to the command center. sAviOr trying to infest the command center. He just has a queen hovering over it, and FirebatHero has retaken that ramp at the 9 o'clock position. He's doing a great job of irradiating sAviOr's units. His plague goes off on all of FirebatHero's science vessels, so sAviOr finally managed to get another plague off, but you've got to feel that FirebatHero with those science vessels is doing a great job of combating sAviOr, and sAviOr has managed to infest that Terran command center. sAviOr has infested the Terran command center at the 9 o'clock position. Brilliant play by sAviOr. Normally when you see a Terran command center infested, the purpose of that is to humiliate your opponent, but sAviOr is actually for the first time in a long time, I don't know when was the last time I saw that used as a tactical maneuver. So sAviOr actually taking out that Expo, unable to get his troops up that ramp, he actually took out that Expo by view of infestation. Absolutely genius play by sAviOr.